Are you comfortable?
I'm as comfortable as I can get.
You are comfortable?
That's exactly what she said, and I'm commissioner. Would you like one or one?
Yeah, I know.
I'm looking at the chairman's pen.
No, you do proceed, yes. I was going to write in your name for the drop. Now, you say.
Mr. D'Souza, can you tell us what your age was in 1980? I don't do any extrapolation.
I think I was 22.
And Mr. D'Souza, are you appearing here as a WPA witness?
No.
Can you tell us what is the basis of your appearance before this commission?
The fact that I gave evidence at the inquest, and the commission staff thought I might have something to add to the other terms.
You were a subpoenaed witness?
No, I was asked that I would be prepared to talk.
On page 57 of the transcript, you refer to, page 58, the House of Israel quasi-religious body appearing on the radio. That's correct?
Yes?
And you also said it was the only radio station in Ghana at the time.
I think I said there were 2 radio stations, but they were both controlled by the state.
Are you aware, Mr. D'Souza, of any executive member of the WPA appearing on the state media, on the radio in particular?
No, not aware of any in that period.
Are you aware of any public critic of the 1 to 2 radio stations having access to those stations?
Don't think so.
You also said, in relation to the House of Israel, they broke up meetings. Those meetings, would they have been meetings authorized by police or unauthorized meetings?
As far as I'm aware, there were authorized meetings.
Was the WPA in a habit of holding meetings that were not authorized?
As far as I'm aware, permission was always applied for the use of a noisy instrument. But this is not an area that I was involved in, applications and so forth.
When you refer to the distance between the place of the meeting in Campbellville and Sophia, you're referring to being the headquarters of the People's National Congress. Is that correct?
Yes.
If you had to put a distance, not by car, an actual distance, number of blocks, how many blocks it would have been between the place of the meeting and the Sophia location?
The blocks are a little irregular in that area, but probably about 5 or 6.
On the issue of quasi-religious groups. Are you aware of any other quasi-religious group or quasi-religious group that operated during the period 78, 79?
It's like what?
Beside the House of Israel.
The only other group that I'm aware of is the People's Temple that are also operating there.
The People's Temple, was that, who was the head of the People's Temple?
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones. As far as you're aware, was that People's Temple allowed to own weapons?
I do not know.
You're aware that Mr. Moses Bagwan is a council record at this commission record,
I wasn't.
and he was also a leader of the Working People's Alliance.
Yes.
Are you aware, Mr. Souza, that Mr. Bagwan was attacked and his hand broken following that meeting?
I believe I gave evidence to that effect.
And when he was attacked, he had actually been not at the scene, but had been removing himself from the place of the meeting.
I believe he was in somebody's yard at the time he was attacked.
I think the records say chicken pen.
Yeah.
So he would already have dispersed when he was attacked by the pursuing forces.
Yes.
And would these persons have been the members of the police force?
And that's what I remember, yes.
Are you aware of any action being taken by the government against any of the persons who might have participated in causing the injury and the broken arm to Attorney General Moses Bagwan?
I'm almost certain no action was taken.
You said to this commission that it was usual in the politics at the time, and probably still now, to trade exchanges between leading politicians. Is that correct?
Yes.
What would you say, Mr. Souza, was the central theme pursued by Dr. Rodney as a leader of the Working People's Alliance? And could you point us to any publication, any book, in which the central theme was in fact set out?
Sorry, theme of...
His message, his political, his ideological message, his popular message.
I would say the central message was found in the slogan, "People's power, no dictator." It was essentially that working people had to understand the conditions of the time and take responsibility for their survival, for their self-determination.
And that was not then or now a violent concept, was it?
No, it wasn't.
You mentioned a couple of times paramountcy. So far as you're aware, was this an administrative arrangement or did it affect citizens generally?
I'd say it affected citizens generally, because way that paramountcy played out, it affected just about every area of life.
Would you like to explain some of those areas? I think you hinted at one this morning, employment.
Yeah.
And how did it manifest? How did paramountcy manifest itself in relation to employment?
Well, in terms of my own knowledge, it meant that getting hold of a party card meant that you might be able to get a job that you were not otherwise qualified for. It meant that people who were supposed to be friends, school friends and so forth, once I become identified with WPA, were not afraid to talk with me because they just felt that they would be victimized in one way or another. Paramountcy also meant that without any kind of public or national discussion, that essential food items that the population depended on could be banned, removed from the shelves, and criminalized. And the possession of any of those items would become a criminal offense.
Of those items,
I don't think all of that. I don't think my commissioners in Iran all of that either. It meant that in any public or national discussion, they have to be lost.
Meant that essential food items on which people depended, that were a necessary part of life, a significant part of life, could be removed from the shelves and criminalized without any national discussion.
could you give us, so it wasn't just the importation of these food items, but the very possession of these items was criminalized?
Yes.
Could you give us some examples of these food items?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if my director could provide me which from a reference that he is examining the witness in relation to. I don't know, we're all over the place. I thought we said some time ago we had a lot of atmospheres, but more atmosphere again. We want to know how Rodney died, how he met his death, what caused it, what was the exposure. That's kind of thing had a lot of evidence. How is this relevant? How is this relevant to that?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Williams has a suspicious way of interrupting at suspicious times.
That's the very great mistake he has as a defense counsel.
But I would like to point him to terms of reference number 1, the facts and circumstances, and these are all facts and circumstances prevailing at the time. Paramountcy has been a principal issue which Mr. Williams wants us to ignore.
Now, the point that he was making is that we have had a large amount of evidence related to the atmosphere of killing 1978 to 80. But the witnesses only, you have only asked one specific question related to that. And to that extent, you are permitted, I would expect you to deal at length with atmosphere, but that is only one question.
But it's all part of the state, the state of power, the concept of paramountcy.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Susan. Sorry, Mr. Susan.
Again, the main items were wheat flour, split peas, and milk, powdered milk. Those are the, I think, the most critical things that were and criminalized.
Did paramountcy manifest itself in the education sector, either from the administrative level, teaching, or at the level of the students?
Well, it seems that instructions to be sent to schools to move teachers, not just teachers, but any public servant, to be removed from one place to the next. So a teacher who might have offended could be transferred to a place that where she or he had no connections.
And when you say offended, might have offended, what do you mean, please?
Might have given political offense.
Sorry, this was a teacher or a shift teacher at the time?
I was just going to ask Mr. Williams, I think your intervention, primarily Mr. Chairman, is quite appropriate because the witness should indicate the particular instances, if she knows of any, which would cause her to say it seemed that instructions could be sent to school.
I was coming to that because I think the witness has a very personal experience in this matter. Could you give us any examples of which you are familiar?
Well, I know of two persons who were transferred because of their association with the WPA.
And these were?
One of them was Benita Harris. Benita Harris. I think she was transferred to a school in the interior. She did not go.
Who is Benita Harris? I don't know how does that assist us?
Benita was one of the leaders of the WPA in 1979.
Benita.
Were there other any areas trained?
Two examples, she just gave one. Sorry, I think
I was only naming one.
without naming the other person, could you give us an instance if you want to protect the identity of that person? Was there another person? You said
Similarly, that there was a teacher who was transferred, but there were also, I'm also aware of police officers who were moved because I think they were considered to be too friendly or polite with WPA.
Other public servants as well?
Yes.
Again, could you cite any examples of persons you might wish to name or who you prefer to remain unnamed?
No, I don't have names of public servants.
I have a question to ask, because I know it has come up in other jurisdictions. The right of the government to transfer teachers from one school to another so that there is equality in the delivery of teaching among different schools. Why are we saying, therefore, that the transfer of someone like Bonita Harris was based on political considerations? I don't know how it operates or how it used to operate here in terms of the general policy of transfers. So I would just like to know if there's any way you can clarify that for us.
I think the timing of the transfer was significant. And it may also be that she was a secondary school teacher and was being sent to primary school, but I'm not absolutely sure about that one.
Thank you.
Mr. Sousa.
Just my own thing is that what about the timing of the city?
At that time, I'm not sure exactly what was happening, but she was out in the public view as a member of the WPA and being very critical publicly.
She was more public and critical.
She was both public and critical.
And if I may stay on this a little longer, if you are able to verify what you seem to be classifying as some kind of emotion, and you get that information later, would you be willing to pass it to the Secretariat? Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
You mentioned and medical attention. Could you say whether this was at a public facility?
I'm sure it wasn't.
Is it then that you're saying it was at a private facility?
Yes, but I do not know where he was staying.
And did you then know why the decision was made not to use a public facility?
Don't think that in the same way that it would have been dangerous for Donald to remain at the scene, it would have been dangerous for Donald to be taken to a public facility.
Can you explain what you mean it would have been dangerous? Would it mean that he would have maybe contained hemorrhage or something more sinister than that?
I'm pretty sure people have described the scene of the time, and I believe that it is entirely possible that once it was known who Donald was, that the medical authorities may have refused to treat him. I believe it's also possible that once it was known who he was, they may have contacted the police, and rather than receive the treatment that he needed, he would have been taken into police custody. So, it is not that one could, in those days, sometimes not even in these days, that one could depend on the police for service and protection, or on the medical authorities for medical attention.
I have one final question to you, Ms. D'Souza. Was the GDF uniform at the time identical to the kit that you were using when you were a member of the Ghana National Service?
Well, I've never seen the army soldiers walking around with bed sheets, which is what we see from my house.
Walking around with, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that now.
The parts of the kids that were seized from my house were bed sheets and pillowcases, and shorts, PT shorts, PT gear.
And the persons who were charged for arson at the Office of the General Secretary of the People's National Congress and the Ministry of National Development were not alleged to have been wearing bed sheets or pillowcases.
Not as far as I'm aware.
I have no further questions, sir. Mr. Chair.
Commission Council will now re-examine the witness. Sorry, read that.
Yes, I just wanted to point out something. I think I found it in one of the special branch documents that we got. I took my cover off, but there is a report is included there. So just to speak this up. An extract from this Chronicle newspaper dated the 27th of the 1st. This is looking 80 something. I'm having a little difficulty here. Which says Alliance, Working People's Alliance activists. Just a minute. Yes, this is 1980, and this, I think, Ms. D'Souza gave evidence of writing on walls using a spray paint, and this is a report which I think I should bring to your attention before the function comes to start, which says Working People's Alliance activist Karen D'Souza, University of Ghana student, was yesterday freed by Magistrate Oscar Kabata on a charge of writing on the wall of Ghana's Store Limited without the consent of the owner. Magistrate remarked that the evidence was grossly unreliable adding that the case was a complete waste of time of the court and police, by the police. The defendant and the DPP's chambers refused an application by the State Council for an adjournment to Monday, etc. I just wanted, I've been trying to find grossly unreliable, adding that the case was a complete waste of the time of the court, the police, the defendant, and the DPP's chambers. The police were previously granted a week's adjournment to make submissions. And the magistrate said that not only was the evidence unreliable and conflicting, but there was no clear evidence that the defendant was the person authorized on the board. Secondly, the marker and spray can, although brought to court, were not tendered as evidence. Thirdly, the spray can and the marker were not found on the defendant, but were in paper bags on the pavement of Ghana stores. So this, I believe, is relevant not only to the evidence Mr. Sousa has given about harassment, which she claims were meted out to her, but also it relates to what has been questioned in relation to the independence of the judiciary and the fact that, in fact, there were decisions which were made
She's done very
in
well.
favor of persons.
The like of our admission that she specializes in creativity.
I think there are other extracts from the police files which may be of assistance in terms of activities at that time in relation to Mr. Sousa. But I found that one very quickly, so I thought I would share it.
Madam Commissioner, it just begs the question as to whether or not she sued for malicious prosecution.
I think we already heard people say, we may wish to ask her, that the atmosphere was such at the time that you get released and you make your way home happily, and there was not a tradition or a culture of proceeding with civil action.
That's not
even when you were vindicated. I'm using my own words, but I think one of them, was it Edward, or one of them said they fled the country immediately after they were released. I don't think it was Edward, I think it was another one, another witness who came forward.
No, Rodney.
I'm not talking about Rodney, Mr. Williams.
My mic is off.
I also wanted to ask a couple of questions, just to clarify a couple of things. For my benefit and for the benefit of the record, Mr. Sousa, you said your trial was transferred from Georgetown to Berbice.
Yes.
Will you please, for the record, indicate the distance that we're talking about when we speak about the transfer?
I'm not sure about the miles, but it's about 2 hours drive by road.
And you say this impacted your attorney's ability to attend
Yes.
your trial. And I had a question to ask you about the National Service paper that has since been clarified. You told us that in addition to the 3 persons who were put on trial for arson, 4 other persons had been arrested for the arson, including yourself, or at the time.
Yes.
Are you able to tell us if charges were brought against the other 3 who were not charged for arson?
One other person was charged that was arrested at that time. Kwame Apaka.
And he was charged for,
I believe, possession of a firearm.
are you able to now tell us what the name of that case? We can find out otherwise.
As far as I'm aware, he was sentenced.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify.
One little clarification, Mr. Sousa. This morning, there was a little debate. The naming of the building that was burned down. Whether it was the Ministry of National Development and the Office of the General Secretary, or the other way around. During the course of this morning, I saw a member of the Secretariat staff distributing and give us a copy of a document dated 19th of June 1978 and signed by P.A. Reed, Honorary General Secretary. And it says, the letterhead seems to suggest that the Office of the General Secretary of the People's National Congress and the Ministry of National Development. Will you be able to clarify that for us?
And read verbatim as Ministry of National Development.
Thank you, Secretary. Ministry.
But what, I'm not sure what you're asking me to clarify.
What was it? We wanted to know,
Correct.
there was debate amongst council whether it was called the Ministry of National Development and the office, or whether, as it is put there on that letterhead, it was the Office of the General Secretary of the People's National Congress and Ministry of National Development. Do you recall?
I couldn't say it.
Mr. Chairman, it would have been gazetted. Can I have the microphone? Ministries would have been gazetted, so that would be that should be the official gazette. That should be a problem. That would have had to be put in the official gazette.
And the Office of the General Secretary would be gazetted as well?
Yes, but whatever the ministry was, it would have been gazetted.
If I may offer some further information on this entity, and I'm going to bring a copy of the estimates for that particular year. It only refers to the ministry. It disguises the fact that it was really part of the Office of the General Secretary of the People's National Congress.
And you will bring the gazette for us?
I will bring the national estimates. My colleague, Mr. Williams, may offer us a copy of the Gazette.
Well, as in the case of the Declaration of Supply, a lot of things circulated as the Declaration of Supply. But then I brought the real Declaration of Supply.
So you bring the real gazette?
Well, we do the real activation.
Mrs. Souza, during your evidence when Mrs. Scotland was questioning you, you answered questions in relation to the ambulance and whether you had seen one. I would wish to direct you to the very last page of your written statement, which is tendered as KDS1. Now, at the time you were answering those particular questions on the ambulance, you did not have before you your written statement.
Correct.
And if you would have a look at the last paragraph, it says there that when I was over, after the 20 minutes, I think Mrs. Scotland read up to there, I decided to go back to Crow Street and moved away from Hatfield Street. When I was over Hatfield Street, there was an ambulance driving slowly towards the scene of the explosion. I ran back to Crow Street and I went upstairs. You will see that there in your statement?
Yes.
And of course, you would rely on what is recorded in your written statement.
Correct.
Although you would have said earlier to council that you didn't recall seeing an ambulance.
Yes, I rely on the written statement.
Mr. Souza, earlier under cross-examination by Mr. Peters, you were asked whether you were of the opinion that the comment used by Dr. Rodney to describe the then Prime Minister, Mr. Burnham, as King Kong was derogatory. And you said you didn't agree that it was derogatory. Could you explain why you didn't agree with that being derogatory?
No, I wasn't responding simply to derogatory. He asked, there was a number of things that he said, not just derogatory.
He was referring to the comment of the back and forth between the WPA and the...
And I'm saying that the question that he asked was not just, was this comment derogatory? Yes, it was a derogatory comment. He also added racist and something, and it is to the collection of descriptions that I said no.
You really not agree that it was collectively those things. Okay. Under cross-examination also, you were...
I'm not sure now what is the answer. The totality was not derogatory, but the particular reference to King Kong was.
Was derogatory.
Is that not the evidence?
One moment.
council have,
Yes.
other council have a note that they can
Madam Commissioner, what I had asked was whether that statement was a racist, derogatory stereotype.
vote for the
She rejected that.
She rejected the
Now,
collective
the specific comment
about
referred to Mr. Burton as King Kong. She knows accept that that was wrong. Is that your-
I accept that that description is derogatory. I do not accept that it was a racist, derogatory stereotype.
In fact, the note I have was King Kong, a derogatory stereotype. And her answer was, it depends on the context. And she was asked, the context in which Rodney used it, was this derogatory? And her answer was no.
It was racist, derogatory.
Racist derogatory, yes. Her answer was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Mr. Souza, under cross-examination a few moments ago, you were asked whether the inference that Donald Rodney left the scene would have been as a result of him being involved in an exercise that would have went wrong. You did not agree with the inference and you referred to it as being inaccurate and inappropriate. You recollect that?
I don't think I was right the question or involved in something that went wrong.
That he was in the exercise of something that went wrong, carrying out an exercise that went wrong.
Explosives.
Yeah, that's what we have.
Yeah.
question.
That he was involved, the first inference that was put was that Donald Rodney had something to hide, that is why he left the scene. Mrs. Souza said that is not inferred by me. So it was the question that followed after that. He left the scene because him and Walter Rodney were involved in an exercise that went wrong. And I believe, on my record, and I would stand corrected by commissioners, is that that is inaccurate and inappropriate inference to be
He
made.
said, yes, it could be inferred, but it would be
Accurate.
inappropriate.
An inaccurate inference to be made. I wanted to know why are you saying it would have been an inaccurate and inappropriate inference to be drawn?
I think we're coming to this commission in 2014, many years after, in a very different political and global situation. And there is much that was part of one's day-to-day existence in 1979 that is, I believe, difficult to comprehend. So the thought, Mr. Williams, the lawyer, is speaking about fleeing the scene of crime, which is nice legal language, but the reality is, for somebody associated with the WPA to be there with Walter in the night after dark, no friends around, to wait there for the police to come, was essentially committing suicide. That was the context in which we were operating. So yes, you can say if you are trying to defend the excesses of the government in that period, yes, that would be your inference. If you're speaking from the comfort, the relative comfort of 2014, not having experienced any of the excesses of the government and the state apparatus of 79, yes, that's an inference you would make. I lived through then and now, and it's not an inference that I would make. I totally understood why you could not say that.
At this time, thank you, Mrs.
No
Souza.
one put together that. The reason for running my case is to secure some assistance for himself and his brother. So that now we have them went to draw. That Donald ran to your house to secure some assistance for himself and his brother. Because if he said that I already had it, and now occurred to you that he was seeking help for himself, he was in blood as well.
His his need was clearly not as immediate or urgent as what he communicated about this day.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, please allow me, I don't know if we will have another witness who was as involved in those activities as Mr. Souza come back. So I just wanted to ask something, because I think you are the first person who mentioned the Declaration of Supply. And am I correct that the principle which you extracted and brought to our attention of the paramount of the party was not unknown to the socialist world, the socialist countries at that time?
I believe it was understood to be part of the socialist world.
And
The
so,
vanguard party.
yeah, and your party was of socialist orientation as well.
Yeah.
So what is the issue that you had with it then?
I believe the issue was about authoritarian behavior. The differences. But I mean, one of the things that I certainly learned is that it really doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about or to try to debate your socialism versus my socialism, as opposed to look concretely at the ways in which people relate to each other, the ways in which power is exercised, and the ways in which, democratic institutions are created and maintained.
Okay, thank you. I was moved to ask you, not only because I wanted to know the facts, but because of the comments you have made more than once in terms of the changes in the world views and not just the local but the international atmosphere now. So I thought I would give you an opportunity to explain what could be interpreted as a contradiction in terms of your own position relative to the declaration. Thank you.
Now, my understanding now, it only remains for me to thank you for coming, both on the last occasion and now again today, and helping us with your testimony. I think we've all come with an interest, and I have no doubt that the Commission will find it of assistance. So thank you very much for coming.